What's up, everybody? I promised you that I was going to do a free agency video about the NFL because this year's free agency has been about 1,000 times more intense than I can ever remember any other free agency period being. And that includes trades as well. I'm not going to talk about every single free agency move made because that would take about 5 hours. I'm going to talk about the biggest moves. I might pick out some other moves, big names that haven't been signed or traded yet, and just give you my thoughts about them. I wanted to wait because it seems like every day there's another big trade or free agent signing coming along, but I think enough is enough. Time to start the video right now. Buckle up because the takes are coming in hot. Let's start off with the most important position, the quarterback position. Now, in terms of guys who re-sign with their own teams, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on that because that's pretty boring. So I'm going to be talking about players who have changed teams, and the biggest name really maybe in all this free agency was Kirk Cousins signing with the Falcons. 4 years, $180 million. Good for Kirk Cousins. I don't know if it's good for Atlanta, and that's not because Kirk Cousins is a bad quarterback. It's just because he's 35 years old. He's going to be 36 by the start of next season, and he's coming off an Achilles tear. And let's just be honest, Kirk Cousins, I've said this 1,000 times, he's like the anti-Brady, where he's going to put up great numbers and the team's going to be mediocre as shit. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and this is the Falcons. So the Falcons, I think the joke was I say Kirk is going to throw for like 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns and have just 5 interceptions, and the Falcons are going to go 8-9 again, just because that's what Kirk Cousins does. The only times as a starter he's ever had double-digit wins was 2019, and then a global pandemic happened, and then in 2022, obviously, with 13 wins, and then the next season he tears his Achilles. So there's always a massive incident whenever Kirk Cousins has a winning season or a double-digit winning season. I give the signing a grade of a C-. The other big signing was Russell Wilson to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I honestly can't believe how quickly Wilson's career has fallen off, and this isn't the only move, by the way, the Steelers have made a quarterback, if you haven't heard. Because in today's day and age, we talk about quarterbacks playing into their 40s and even into their mid-40s, and Russell Wilson is 35. Now, he's older, but we've seen quarterbacks, Brady, Rodgers, Peyton, Breeze, they've all been able to do well into their 30s, into their 40s, and produce, and Wilson the last couple years in Denver just fell off a cliff. He's had 3 straight losing seasons. He, at one time, looked like a surefire Hall of Famer, and now people are saying, is he going to be a Hall of Famer? I still think he's going to make the Hall of Fame. Over 334 touchdown passes, 43,000 yards. He has a Super Bowl ring, even though he really didn't do anything in that Super Bowl win. All of his stats already came when they were up by 29, but I digress. Anyway, so he's in this weird kind of purgatory where he's a Hall of Famer, but is he really? And so you kind of keep waiting for him to have that second spark of life and that second win in his career, because he just feels like he's still too young to be completely washed all of a sudden. But hey, he is undersized. He's 5'11". He wasn't even supposed to be a success to begin with. The fact that he was successful at that height to begin with was an asterisk in itself, which is why he's nicknamed the Asterisk. Literally, you go to ProFootballReference.com. But overall, I think with the Steelers, I don't mind this signing because I think he's still better than Kenny Pickett, who I'm not going to talk about that much in this video because there's nothing happened with Kenny Pickett, okay? Overall, I give the Steelers signing Russell Wilson a safe grade of B-. If it works out, then it works out as a surprise. If it doesn't work out, then they have a backup plan in place, which I'll get to in a bit. Talk about some other guys. Gardner Minshew signing with the Raiders, 2 years, $25 million. Not bad for basically a backup spot starter. Jacoby Brissett returns to New England, where he once led them to a championship in 2016 when he went and won a game versus Houston with the Patriots. Don't forget that. And Tom Brady was suspended for cheating. And then this one I like. Jameis Winston signing with the Cleveland Browns. 1 year for $4 million. It wasn't enough to have Deshaun Watson on the roster. You got to have Jameis Winston. I would be stunned if Ben Roethlisberger at this point doesn't come out of retirement and sign with the Browns to complete the holy trinity of women-respecting quarterbacks on the Browns roster. It's pretty insane. The whole Flacco situation, the whole Flacco stretch is going to seem like a fever dream in about, 6 months once the season starts again, because the Browns went from extremely unlikable because of their quarterback to, oh, here's this really feel-good story about Flacco at the quarterback, and now they're back to being like the most hated quarterback room in the league. So I don't really have a grade for them signing Winston because Jameis is just, he is, as a quarterback, he is what he is. He's going to throw 10 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and is going to throw 300 yards while doing it per game. But I guess I'll give it an average grade of C. I think that he's back, in terms of backups, he's okay. But if he's your starter, then you're not going to win shit. We got some other signings. Tyrod Taylor is doing his daily musical chairs where he's now signing with the Jets. Pretty good signing in terms of value until he inevitably gets hurt 5 minutes into if he has to ever play. Sam Darnold, once again on the move with the Minnesota Vikings. He's played for 4 teams now after being drafted, I think, 3rd overall by the Jets. Sam Darnold is still younger than Joe Burrow, which is crazy to think about because he was drafted a couple years before Burrow. And he's already on his 4th team, and Burrow is still seen as like one of the young stars in the NFL, and Darnold is this washed up has-been. And I don't think Darnold's anything special or anything. I think he's pretty bad, but it's just funny how it's just crazy. It's a mind fuck when you realize that he's still relatively young, and the Vikings needed something to patch up the Kirk Cousins, losing Kirk Cousins. Drew Lock signing with the Giants. Inevitably, I feel like he will get to play at some time this year because Daniel Jones, I just don't see Daniel Jones either in terms of injury or in terms of performance-wise where Daniel Jones is going to be able to last 17 games. He's either going to flame out so badly, Daniel Jones is talking about, that Drew Lock will get an opportunity at some point. Ryan Tannehill's still out there, although he's pretty washed up. Tyler Huntley stinks. Josh Dobbs, good for a game or two, but I think we all know that now. Did you know he was a astrophysicist? I don't think nobody talks about that. Mason Rudolph, famous friend of Myles Garrett, played actually surprisingly well for the Steelers last year in place of Kenny Kitten Mittens. Signed with the Titans. I actually don't mind that deal. I think it was pretty good. Josh Johnson, this motherfucker literally is, he's the Kenny Lofton. He has played for like 20 teams. Good for you, Josh Johnson, continuing to keep at the dream even though you stink. Now gotta get some other free agency signings, some very important ones. The most important in terms of handsomeness was my beautiful Italian stallion Jimmy Garoppolo has found a deal and a new home. He is now with the Rams as a backup to Matthew Stafford, and of course he is going to be suspended for the first couple games because he wants to win so badly that he was trying PEDs because he wants to win so badly. It's not his fault. I give that grade. I give that deal an A+. And then we have the Colts. The Colts are signing Joe Flacco, which you can see from a mile away that Joe Flacco is going to go back to being dog shit, and that his time with the Browns, where he looked like the best player in the league out of nowhere for 3 or 4 weeks, was the equivalent of a dying dog having one last burst of energy. So I give the Flacco deal to the Colts a grade of D. But I do admire Flacco for his comeback story after his head was amputated several years ago. He's a tough motherfucker. Nobody can deny his toughness. I mean, you can just look at this actual thing that happened in this thread by the actual Ian Rappaport. You can tell it was an unbelievable story. So people who think he didn't deserve comeback player of the year over DeMar Hamlin, I think you need to look at this. Let's get into some trades. And you gotta be fucking kidding me. I'm sorry, I just got pissed all over again. Philadelphia Eagles, my team, my Eagles, they traded for Kenny Kitten Mittens. Now, Kenny Kitten Mittens has 13 touchdown passes. Ryan Leaf had 14 touchdown passes. Walter Payton and LaDainian Tomlinson put together have more touchdown passes than Kenny Pickett and his tiny hands. I know he's supposed to be the backup, but it's like, why are you even trading for him? Because he's already older for a guy who's going to be going into his 3rd year. He's really shown nothing. So I at least would have understood if they had traded for Justin Fields. That would have made more sense to me because I'm like, okay, at least Fields has the physical tools and at least he's kind of like a similar prototype to Jalen Hurts, like the mobile dual threat quarterback ideally. But Kenny Pickett, why the fuck did you trade for Kenny Pickett? Grade F. Come on, Howie Roseman, what the hell, man? And finally, we talk about Justin Fields, we talk about the Steelers. The Steelers traded for Justin Fields, and for Fields, this might be a great move because he gets to sit back, at least ideally, and sit behind Russell Wilson for a year. But again, we don't know, is Russell Wilson just going to be a temporary starter? We don't know. The Steelers are just weird. They are so tradition-based, and I mean, they've had 3 head coaches over the last 60 years, so they don't make a lot of rash decisions usually when it comes to important positions like quarterback or coach. They usually have a long leash. So them getting rid of Pickett and bringing in Fields, for me, and I've been the most outspoken, I literally called this a year ago. I said that Fields sucks, and I've been saying this for a long time in a lot of my videos. I just want to flex here for a second, and I have it actually in stone, in writing. A year ago, I talked about how on Twitter, I predicted the exact thing what's going to happen this year. Fields gets traded from the Bears after he has another shitty season, and they draft Caleb Williams 1st overall, and guess what's going to happen? Boom, Caleb Williams is going to be a Bear. But anyway, I think if you're talking about just value, and I think Fields stinks, but he's still capable of some good plays. In today's day, I mean, I'm looking at the NFL trades. This is a good moment. Let's segue for a moment into the NFL trades that have happened so far this offseason. Justin Fields was traded for a conditional 6th-round pick in 2025. That's really nothing. I'm looking at guys, Keenan Allen, who is older and still good, but he's an older receiver was traded for a 4th-round pick. Desmond Ridder was traded for Rondale Moore. Mac Jones, that's the same value. Mac Jones got traded to be a backup to the Jaguars, and he was traded for the same fucking value, basically, as Justin Fields. 6th-round pick, 2024. I'm looking at all this shit, and you got like Sam Howell and a 4th and 6th rounder. That netted more than Justin Fields. This really shows how little the rest of the league feels about Justin Fields, in my opinion, more than anything else. Either that or the Bears were jokingly saying, hey, yeah, we'll throw in like a 6th-round pick, blah, blah, blah. And the Steelers, being morons, were like, we'll take it. You know, I mean, I don't understand how they couldn't get more out of the deal just off of the quote-unquote potential that Fields still has. But while I'm here, let's talk about some of the other trades I haven't mentioned. Brian Burns, very good player going from the Giants to the Panthers, but I still think you're trading at least 2 draft picks, 2nd-round pick included for Brian Burns. I don't know if it's worth that for a defensive end. Jerry Jeudy, the perennial breakout superstar. I thought he was finally going to break out last year in Denver with Russ and Sean Payton, and it didn't happen. Now he's off to Cleveland, be with Groper Cleveland. Carlton Davis, a decent cornerback. Deontay Johnson is a good receiver, at least as a number 2 or 3, but he's going to a situation in Carolina where he doesn't have a quarterback. Bryce Young's terrible. We all know that. So I don't know how good he's going to be. But there is some big news. I think the Sam Howell era in Washington was hilarious. For about 3 weeks, we got Sam Howell and he's going to be the next guy. And after 1 year full of interceptions and sacks, he's gone to Seattle to be Geno Smith's backup in exchange for a 3rd and a 5th rounder. But I do like how Desmond Ridder is the only guy on here who was traded straight up for another player. Arizona was like, yeah, I guess we'll take Ridder. And Atlanta was like, that's all you're going to get. We're not going to give you any fucking draft picks for this guy because he sucks and he fumbles on the goal line. He had 4 or 5 goal line fumbles last year out of the end zone for a touchback. So, and he has the whole at least he has the DoorDash sponsorship to help him through it. Rondale Moore, I remember watching Rondale Moore at Purdue, and he's so tiny you can fit him. He might be the only NFL player who's smaller than Bryce Young. So I'm kind of sad that the Panthers didn't trade for Rondale Moore so that him and Bryce Young could become the smallest combination to ever play in the NFL in terms of quarterback receiver. So those are the trades thus far and the quarterbacks thus far. All right, so now let's move into the running backs. And this was an unbelievably active free agency period for running backs. The biggest and most emotional signing was Saquon Barkley signing with my Eagles. And I love all the Giants fans who are acting like Saquon Barkley committed a fucking homicide, like he killed 3 people or something. It's unbelievable. For the actual move itself, look, I don't think Saquon or running backs in general are super, super important. I think for getting him 3 years, $38 million, I mean, it's whatever. I think he's still under 30, and if he's healthy, he's a good player. I just think that he's so far away from the beast that he was coming out of Penn State. He's more of a name than a game type of guy, and it seems like since the Super Bowl loss, that's really all that the Eagles have been chasing is guys who are big names. Their name is bigger than their game at this point, and Saquon isn't the only guy that the Eagles signed in this free agency period thus far that was like this. But overall, I guess I'm gonna give the signing an A strictly for the reactions. The reactions from Giants fans was worth it because they were so emotional and they acted like Saquon Barkley did what Ted Bundy did. It was fucking ridiculous and hilarious. We go to Josh Jacobs, famous safe driver. He's now with the Packers, and Josh Jacobs, who's a first-team All-Pro a couple years ago, he's now at the Packers, who just had they just swapped out Josh Jacobs for Aaron Jones. And so this is kind of like a dual package. Aaron Jones signing with the rival Viking. And Aaron Jones is a guy that his best games, he's kind of a bit of a tease. He has like a stretch of 3 or 4 games every year where he looks like the best player or the best running back in the league. And then he gets hurt, or you have to kind of manage how many carries he gets. And, so in terms of actually the signings, I don't mind the signings. I don't think any of these signings are really going to change. Like, do I think Josh Jacobs is going to be the difference between Jordan Love being good and being a Hall of Famer? No. So I guess I'll give that like a C grade. As for the Vikings signing Aaron Jones, this is kind of like the RC Cole version of Saquon leaving the Giants and going to the Eagles. You got Jones leaving the Packers, going to the Vikings. Although, I mean, I haven't checked in with Packers Twitter, but I'm sure some of them are kind of pissed that Aaron Jones would go to the Vikings. But, I mean, I certainly haven't seen as much outrage because Aaron Jones isn't as big of a name as Saquon. But I guess the Aaron Jones signing, fuck it. Let's give it a B-. Who gives a shit? This is all just subjective anyway. One of the other big signings in terms terms of legacy signings was the Ravens signing Derrick Henry. Now, Henry is really the last, I would say, big name running back who could be in the Hall of Fame and is worthy of being as good as Devin Hester. And so the Ravens got him. The Ravens got him for 2 years, $16 million. He's over 30. Basically, like I said, he's like the last of a dying breed, the old workhorse back. But again, in Baltimore, it's kind of, Lamar is going to run the ball a lot himself, and they got a bunch of other guys. Kind of, this isn't, again, it's a big name. I think people are overrating it a bit. I give it a C- grade just because I don't think Derrick Henry is the same Derrick Henry who ran for 2,000 yards a couple years ago. He's still a good player, but he's not, people are like, oh my God, Derrick Henry. It's at the end of the day, if the Ravens are going to win a Super Bowl, I don't think Derrick Henry is going to be the difference in them beating Patrick Mahomes, which is really what it's all about at the end of the day. And just looking at the rest of the free agency class, got a guy like Tony Pollard signed with Titans. Now, he was supposed going into last year, I thought Tony Pollard was going to be like a breakout candidate for the Cowboys. Never happened. So him getting a 3-year deal for $24 million is pretty good considering he was pretty disappointing for the Cowboys last year and isn't really a full-time back. Another big name, Austin Eckler, signed with the Washington Commanders. Again, a big name, but one of the biggest touchdown vultures ever. He isn't, I don't know how good Austin Eckler really is as a running back. I really don't, I don't think he's bad, but I never watched Austin Eckler play and felt like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. DeAndre Swift leaving my Eagles. The Eagles basically swapped out Swift with Saquon. J.K. Dobbins is still out there. Devin Singletary is with the Giants. Gus Edwards leaving the Ravens, going to the Chargers. A.J. Dillon re-signed with the Packers. Now, if I was the Packers, personally, I would have put more effort into, if I could have, put more effort into keeping Aaron Jones. I would have added whatever money Aaron Jones' contract wanted, or however much more money Aaron Jones wanted, and just let A.J. Dillon go. Because A.J. Dillon, I think, is overrated. Oh, he's so big and he has such big thighs. Who gives a shit? Deonta Foreman, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is really the biggest name left. I think it's telling, and it's hilarious. The Chiefs, the Chiefs made 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 years, and they've won the last 2 championships despite completely whiffing on the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick in 2020. I just can't, and again, because running backs, it's kind of a dime a dozen. I just can't imagine if they actually, they kind of fixed it with Pacheco, but it's hilarious if they actually had an actual good player with the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick. They might be even more unstoppable than they are now. But that sums up the running back class and my thoughts on them. Now moving over to the wide receivers, and a lot of the biggest names, T. Higgins, who I think was demanding a trade from the Bengals. He was so upset about Joe Burrow taking a photo with Trump at a UFC event that he demanded a trade, but the Bengals franchise tagged him. I don't know what's going on there. Michael Pittman Jr., 3 years, $70 million to stay with the Colts. Mike Evans, obviously, he's going to be a lifer with Tampa Bay. We all remember Mike Evans leading the Buccaneers to a championship in 2020. I would say the biggest names in terms of new places are Hollywood Brown, who is much more of a bigger name than he is in terms of actually how good he is, because the name Hollywood Brown is just kind of whatever. He signed with the Chiefs. I actually like that signing. I'm giving that a B+. They need somebody at the receiver position, and I think Brown, while he's not great, I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver there, unless Rashee Rice develops more. The biggest name overall, I would say, in terms of a guy moving, was Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, this guy is almost 30 years old, and he's been in the league. He was drafted, I tweeted this. This is amazing to me. Tyron Smith, who I'll get to in a bit. Tyron Smith was drafted in 2011, and he's only 4 years older than Calvin Ridley, who was drafted 7 years after him. That's fucking ridiculous. Calvin Ridley is, I think, a year younger than Mike Evans, who was drafted 4 years before him. I don't know. He's fucking old is the point. He's a good player, and I think he'll give Will Levis a good player to throw it to. But yeah, $92 million. That seems a little bit much for Calvin Ridley. That, I don't know. So just off of instinct, that seems a little bit too much for me. Bit of an overpay. So I'll give it a good player, but I'll give that signing a C. You got Gabe Davis, and Gabe Davis goes from obviously the Bills to the Jaguars, 3 years, $39 million. Good signing. He's a typical number 2 receiver. No offense to Odell Beckham, who you can see is obviously still unsigned at this stage. He'll always be the biggest name. Odell will always be the biggest name at the receiver position the rest of his career, in my opinion, as long as he's playing, even though he hasn't been a great player since 2016. But anyway, back to Gabe Davis. He'll always be most remembered, I feel like, for that playoff game. But he's a good secondary receiver, not a true number 1. But I do like the fact that they were able to get him after losing Calvin Ridley, and they got him at a much better price. So I think I'll give that a B+ grade. I already talked about Odell. Tyler Boyd's a good player. He's still out there. A good, solid 2 or 3 receiver. Curtis Samuel going with the Bills. Darnell Mooney with the Falcons. Kendrick Bourne re-signing with the Patriots. That's not really a big deal. Then you got other, let's look through some of the big names here. Michael Thomas. It's really crazy how quickly his career fell after 2019 was his last great year, and then he had some injuries, and then after that, he was made fun of for having a bunch of slam slants and running slants only. But he was a good player. It's sad how his career has turned out. Looking at the rest, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, fresh off a back-to-back Super Bowls, had a touchdown catch, had some big moments in the playoffs, but there's a reason he's still free agent right now, because he has issues with his hands. But he's going to land somewhere soon. Braxton Berrios, hard worker, handsome guy. He will find his way soon. Probably somewhere for a coach who's with the Belichick tree, because Belichick drafted him and because there's always room in the league for undersized white guys who look like Wes Welker, slot receivers like that. Byron Pringle, I'll always remember his name just because Pringle and makes me hungry. Chase Claypool, another guy who his career just went right in the tank very, very quickly. Looked like he had some potential as a rookie. I don't even know how, he's still pretty young, and he's already, nobody wants him. Talked about some of the other trades. So that does it for the wide receiver position. Let's take a quick look at the tight end free agency group. Not a lot of real major signings here. The biggest names, Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, Noah Fant, they all stayed with their same teams. There's really no game changers here. Gerald Everett with the Bears, decent player, but he's like a second option tight end. He's not a star tight end. Kobe Parkinson, no offense to Michael J. Fox, got a pretty big deal, and I've never really even heard of him or heard his name much. Mike Gesicki, another big name, going from the Patriots to the Bengals. He looked like he might be a star a couple years ago with the Dolphins. I don't know what happened there. Logan Thomas, former Virginia Tech quarterback. I'll always remember him for that. He's still a free agent. Jonnu Smith is with Miami now. He had the big free agency a couple years ago with the Patriots and did not live up to that. Former Titan as well. So yeah, not a lot of big signings here. Moving over to the offensive line. Now I know most of you guys don't give a shit about the offensive line, so I kind of lumped them all together. The biggest name, and I screenshotted this before Smith signed with the Jets, is Tyron Smith here. And Tyron Smith is, people say he might be a Hall of Famer, and he's 33 years old, but the guy, he's injury prone as hell. I'm surprised that he's not with Dallas still, because I'm surprised really Dallas in general has been pretty inactive during this free agency period, which is, I mean, I don't mind it as an Eagles fan. But this is a guy who, just look at his games played over the last couple years, he's been unbelievably just fragile, and he can't even practice without, he can't practice. Like, so him, again, big name, and he's going to be with Aaron Rodgers, who might be our future vice president, who knows? So Tyron Smith, and this is an overused joke, but Tyron Smith might become a Secret Service agent soon, who knows? But if you said like 5 years ago, you got Tyron Smith protecting Aaron Rodgers' blind side, it would have been amazing. Now, in going into 2024, it's just kind of sad. So I give the signing of Tyron Smith, I give it a D signing. Mekhi Becton is the name to me. I thought when I watched, and I actually watched his film as a rookie, and I thought he was going to be like the next big thing. So the fact that he is still out there in the market, I would expect him to land. I think he's gonna find another place, just because he's just such a huge guy and his potential is ridiculous still. But he's just so big and he's so fat. But as a rookie, if you go and I actually took the time to watch some of his film, and his highlights were insane. So I thought he was going to have a much better career than he ended up having. And he's a big reason why the Jets went out to get Tyron Smith, because he wasn't cutting it. I'm not going to even pretend to really know like I know much about the center's position. Connor Williams still out there. I'm sure he's good. Looking at some of the guards, the center position, the only thing I know is that, the biggest and most famous center in NFL history, Jason Kelce, is retired, unfortunately. His body finally has given up on him. Looking just through some of the guards, it's amazing how many former first-round picks you see here. They're just kind of floating around. Those are the guards and the tackles and stuff. Those are the picks in the first round that always get forgotten about. They kind of fill out the first round every year, or the earlier rounds every year, but everybody just remembers the skill position players. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on the offensive line. I don't know. There's no real there wasn't any massive or elite tackle that hit the market this year that changed teams, or as far as I know. Maybe, the guys who are into the offensive line fetishists, they can disprove me in the comments. I'll gladly take, I will gladly be proven wrong. But Tyron Smith being the biggest move for offensive linemen is, in a free agency full of a bunch of big moves, it's a pretty weak class, in my opinion. Getting to the defensive linemen now, we get to the interior defensive linemen. Now, the superstar, the biggest name was Chris Jones, and he unsurprisingly re-signed with Kansas City for $159 million. Chris Jones, famous NFL combine runner, don't Google it. He is on track to be a Hall of Famer, so, you give him his money. He performed like it. The biggest move, I would say, in terms of player switching was Christian Wilkins going from the Dolphins to the Raiders, one of the most underrated players in the league. I like the signing by the Raiders. The Raiders always have a shitty defense, so them getting as many good defensive players, or besides Max Crosby, is an actual smart decision, because they whiffed on basically that draft they had a couple years ago where they drafted Clelin Ferrell and Jonathan Abram, and Josh Jacobs was their one hit, and now he's gone too. So that whole 2019 draft, I think it was, or one of those drafts where they had 3 first-round picks, they all completely whiffed on him. But anyway, I get the Christian Wilkins signing an A- for the Raiders, even though it might be a little pricey, but I think he's worth it. Him and Max Crosby are going to be very, very disruptive. Leonard Leonard Williams re-signed with the Seahawks. He's always going to be most famous for his afro, even though he's a good player. I love how just, Fletcher Cox retired. Yes, Fletcher Cox retired. Jason Kelce retired. A lot of big changes for my Eagles. Javon Kinlaw, the former first round pick from the 49ers, didn't amount to anything. Again, the 49ers have whiffed. You talk about Trey Lance. You got Javon Kinlaw. They've whiffed on so many first round picks in recent memory, and yet they have one of the best teams and they have like the best roster in the league still, because they've hit on so many picks late anyway. But yeah, so he's a name that stands out. I'm just looking through A'Shawn Robinson. I'll always remember him because he was like the biggest born infant or something. Like he was like 20 pounds or something as like when he was born. I don't know, but he's always looked about 30 years older than he actually is. So I don't know why I mentioned that. Solomon Thomas, another guy, another former first round pick. I think he was a third overall or fourth overall pick by the 49ers back early in the Shanahan days. And they not a complete bust, but he's already been on several other teams. So another impact pick that the 49ers whiffed on. Taven Bryan, another first round pick, Jaguars, but that everybody could kind of see that coming, that Bryan was going to suck, and so it's no surprise there. William Golston. Oh, that last name Golston. It's not even, he himself has had a respectable career, but that name Golston, Jets fans know. Vernon Golston sends shivers of fear down their spine. Probably the worst player I've ever seen on a snap-by-snap basis. And I'm looking at, you got Jaguars, Eric Armstead. A little bit of a reach there for me. I think he was kind of, the 49ers defense has been elite in recent years. $51 million seems a little pricey for him, but, compared to some of the other stuff, it's not terrible. Moving on to the defensive ends, or the edge defenders, if you want to be a douche. Now, there were some big names here. Josh Allen, I already talked about Brian Burns in terms of him being traded, but Josh Allen from the Jaguars being franchise tag, he's going to be a big name. What are the odds? Imagine Josh Allen, the Jaguars, is literally is one of the best players, and he happens to share a name with a guy at the same time at the most important position who's probably going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's kind of like, imagine if there was like a receiver in the 70s and 80s named Walter Payton who was like a consistent Pro Bowler, but it happened like it's something like that. But anyways, the biggest signing here is by far Danielle Hunter with the Texans. This to me is probably, I would say, value everything. I give this an A+. This is the best. I think Danielle Hunter still should have a lot of years left in the tank. To get him for 2 years, $49 million, that seems like an absolute steal. Bryce Huff, I think my Eagles overpaid for him. Chase Young's another big name, second overall pick, had that rookie season that was good. He won Rookie of the Year, and then he had a bunch of injuries, and then he was finally healthy last year. The 49ers picked him up, and he kind of had a big couple of first games, and he kind of disappeared again, and now he's a free agent. And it's interesting, I look at him and Jadeveon Clowney, and Clowney is another guy where I thought his career, to this day, I've seen, I thought he was going to have a much better career than he's had. And Jadeveon Clowney has had a good career, but it seems like every year he's on another team, and he never really found a home. He never became the double-digit sack threat that I think everybody thought he was. I remember him when he got picked by the Texans first overall, him and J.J. Watt, and this is with prime peak J.J. Watt, like GOAT level J.J. Watt. Everyone was like, Jesus, they're going to become like best duo ever, and it never happened. That was just a little aside. But Chase Young and Jadeveon Clowney, both kind of similar players where they're former top 2 picks. They have value, but overall disappointing, at least in Chase Young's. Jadeveon Clowney, good player, disappointing. Chase Young, disappointing. Jonathan Greenard, 4 years, $76 million. I mean, compared to Danielle Hunter, I think that's an overpay. So Darius Smith is staying with the Browns. Leonard Floyd, former first overall pick, not first overall. That's the second time I've said that in this video. This is what happens when you ramble and you ad-lib. How will he do without Aaron Donald next to him? I don't know, but with the 49ers, who knows? They always find production from somewhere. Other big names, there's a lot here. Calais Campbell, a guy who some people say is going to be a future Hall of Famer, has over 100 career sacks. He's still a free agent. He might retire. Brandon Graham was the other guy for the Eagles, along with Kelce and Fletcher Cox, who people were saying, well, he might retire because he's part of the old guard, but nope, he's back. He's been with the Eagles since 2010. He's been in the league since Brett Favre was still playing. Famous welfare respecter Brett Favre. So, but, give him a 1-year deal. He can still make a couple plays. I'm looking at Derek Barnett, who recovered Brandon Graham's strip sack of Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52. He's still a free agent, former first-round pick. Kyle Van Noy, former Patriot. Marcus Davenport. Now, here's another guy. There's a lot of guys here that were first-round picks, and I remember the Saints, they spent a bunch in the draft to get this guy Davenport as a project. They were banking on his potential, and that didn't work, obviously, because he's now with Detroit as he signed a 1-year deal. He disappointed. Bud Dupree is another disappointment. Clelin Ferrell, another one. keep going down. This is like a fucking Dante Fowler Jr. I mean, there's like a bunch of former high first round picks here, not high in terms of marijuana, but high in terms of where they were selected, that never amounted or came close to their expectations, and they're all here edge defenders. Wow, it's just crazy. And you got Jerry Hughes, who was in that class. Jerry Hughes was first round pick of the Colts, I remember, and he looked like a draft bust his first couple years, and then the fact that he ended up having a 15-year NFL career, to me, is amazing. But yeah, you see all these free agents, there's a reason they're still free agents. Anyway, so moving on now to the linebackers, and the biggest move, at least in terms of quality, was probably Patrick Queen going from the Ravens to the Steelers. 3 years, $41 million. Queen's a good player, and I think you look at him with the Steelers, I would say I'll give this a B+ grade. I think that the Steelers always seem to have good defensive players. That's just what they do, because they always find a way to make every game ugly. Some other big names here. Levante David stayed with the Buccaneers. Bobby Wagner is on the move once again. So Bobby Wagner was with Seattle in 2020. He was Legion of Boom, All-Pro, future Hall of Famer, had 1 year with the Rams, goes back to Seattle for another year. Now he's back on the move again. Moving around more than my ex-wife. Anyway, so I guess I'll give that grade for the Commandos. I'll give that a D grade because he's more name than game. Been that way for a while now, honestly. But here's the big one. Devin White was so hyped up. The Devin White signing by my Eagles. Devin White is fucking terrible. I can't think of a guy. I'm giving this a D-. I can't think of a guy with a bigger disparity between his highlight reel and how bad he actually is in terms of an NFL player. It's like he is like a guy who in basketball has unbelievable handles but shoots like 36% from the field. But his highlights and his like ankle breakers and shit are amazing. But he's actually not a good player. Kind of like Jamal Crawford. Although Jamal Crawford, he's like Jamal Crawford looking. So I give that a D- grade. The only reason I'm not giving it an F is just because my own insecurity as an Eagles fan. I don't want it to be an F. Looking down the rest, some big names. Shaq Leonard, formerly known as Darius Leonard. Amazing how quickly his career has fallen off. And he was, the Eagles have basically swapped out him for Devin White, and he was supposed to be, the big signing. Oh, they got Shaq Leonard. Oh my God. And he did absolutely nothing. So he's completely washed up. He got some injuries and stuff. Isaiah Simmons, another first round pick from the Cardinals, who was drafted on his tools and his measurables and stuff. Still a free agent, never amounted to much. Devin Bush, I remember him from the Steelers. Jordan Hicks, former Eagle, now at the Browns. That's a decent signing. He's a good player. Moving on to the last part, the defensive backs, cornerbacks, and safeties. Some of the biggest names, you have Rachel Bush's husband, Steph Curry lookalike Jordan Poyer. Changing teams in the AFC East, going from the Bills to the Dolphins. He can still play though, so I would give him a C- grade. Who cares? The other name I thought was interesting was Jeff Okudah. This guy was like the highest drafted safety in ever, and he's already on his third team, and he's been in the league for like 4 years. So you talk about one of the biggest draft busts. He went from the Lions to the Falcons. He's now with the Texans. They're obviously banking on his potential, but I'll give that a D+ grade. Darnell Savage, the Jaguars signed Darnell Savage. That's an awesome name. That's one of the best names. And it's not even like that Darnell Savage is necessarily a great player, decent player, but an all-time football name. Same thing, but I don't think anybody will ever have a better name for football than Whitney Mercilus still. And they were actually on the same team for a little bit back in 2021 when the Packers signed Mercilus. Those were the days. So anyways, let's look through some of the bigger names. The Chiefs, they didn't let Jadarius Sneed get away, which was very smart of them. Jalen Johnson re-signed with the Bears for a fortune. Stephon Gilmore, it might be time for him to become a family man. He was with Dallas last year. Sean Murphy Bunting, I'll always remember him. He signed with the Cardinals. I remember him for holding in the NFC Championship game against the Packers, so that just pisses me off still. Rock Ya-Sin, I don't even know if he's a real person. Is he a real person? Rock Ya-Sin? But that's like, it doesn't even sound like a name. It sounds like an experience that you would have. It's like, we need to rock your sin from your body. It doesn't even sound like a person. Is that even real? I don't even know it's real anymore. Looking at the safeties, Antoine Winfield Jr., franchise tag by the Buccaneers. He's going to be in line for a big contract. Kyle Duggar is a very good player with the Patriots. Him and Christian Gonzalez, if they're healthy, should be a really good tandem in they're going to be like really, I think, some of the last positive remnants of the Belichick era that he added. The Eagles, we brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson for $33 million over 3 years max. It's kind of whatever. A lot of this stuff, a lot of these guys, Micah Hyde, another guy, former Packer, might be time for him to be a family man. Eddie Jackson's got first of all, before Eddie Jackson a couple years ago, All-Pro, and then he's another guy who's fallen off. It's really, when you really map out shit like this, it's really crazy how quickly some of these guys' careers just go down the tube in the NFL. I mean, it really is. It's a nasty business. But Eddie Jackson, his career has gone down tubes pretty quickly. Jalen Mills, Eagle, Patriot with the Giants now. He's going to be on a team that's probably going to be like 4-13 with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. So good for him. At least he got some millions, I'm hoping. hoping. Kevin Byard was another signing, big name signing for our Eagles that we've had in the last 12 months and didn't really do much. He's not our problem anymore. He's with Bears now. So the Bears, congratulations. You're going to be, hopefully he'll help out Kalen Williams. I want to see Caleb Williams succeed. So hopefully he'll help spearhead a defense. And that's about it. And there was only, you guys know my disdain for special teams. There's only one noteworthy special teams transaction, in my opinion. That was the Eagles re-signing Jake Elliott. This, unironically, might be the best move the Eagles have made in the last 12 months, ever since they lost the Super Bowl, is keeping Jake Elliott. I'm not even joking. It's crazy. Anyway, so I give this signing an A+. Congratulations. Great job, Howie. Thank you. This almost makes up for you trading for Kenny Pickett.